Welcome to the Focus 3 podcast with Tim and Brian Kight. And BK is in the Pac Northwest up in Seattle. So I'm here today with David Trishell. David's producing the show today. Hi, David.
Hey, TK.
Good to see you, man.
You too.
Before I start today's podcast, and we're going to talk today, by the way, about mental toughness, 5 attributes of mental toughness. And I think you're going to get a great deal of value from today's episode. But just a word about number 50 that's coming up after this one. A very special guest that we had on our podcast, and I'll tell you more about that at the end of this one. So you hear a lot today about mental toughness. You hear a great deal about it in athletics. You hear a great deal about it in business. You hear a great deal about it in virtually every domain. And I'm not sure it's always carefully or clearly defined. So what I want to do today is describe 5 attributes of what mental toughness is, and 5 attributes that describe how it operates, and give some practical advice, some tools and some techniques that all of us can use to create greater degrees of mental toughness in our life. And I think you're going to find it very helpful for virtually every dimension of what you do personally and professionally. Let's get to work. Attribute number 1 of mental toughness is self-awareness. That's where it starts. That's the beginning point. That's step 1. And self-awareness is the ability to recognize your emotions and understand what they're saying to you, what they mean, and what they want you to do. It's important to understand that emotion is energy. And particularly, it's energy for action. The word emotion actually means evoke motion. And emotion is an impulse to move. Anger, for example, is the impulse to move against someone or something. Fear is the impulse to move away from someone or something. Affection is the impulse to move toward, and sadness is the impulse not to move at all, but to simply be still and be sad. So if we're going to be mentally tough, we have to be self-aware. We have to be very aware of and pay attention to and recognize what emotions are happening within us and what our emotions want us to do or not to do, and to recognize what the signals are being sent by our emotions. And again, emotion means evoke motion. An emotion is an impulse to do something. And whether we do that or not, well, that's another discipline. So Dave, just as you hear that, this whole notion of awareness of emotion, do you think most people are aware, 1, of the emotions that they have, and 2, what they mean? Do you think that's something that is present or absent in most people's lives?
Absent in most.
Why do you say that? What's been your life observation about that?
Mostly because they don't know what that emotion sounds like. They don't know what that voice inside their head is telling them. And that they feel it and they know it, but they don't know how to identify it when it's taking them down a path they don't want to go.
Yeah, or it's they have an emotion, they have a feeling, they have an impulse to do something or not do something. And the power, the strength of that is so great oftentimes it sort of drowns out the reason. It drowns out. So emotion sometimes drowns out cognition. Feelings drive out thinking. The emotional brain drives out the rational brain. And as a consequence of that, people feel an emotion and they don't necessarily slow down to evaluate it. And this is where impulse comes from, right?
Absolutely.
So the next step in this process then, once we're self-aware and we're having greater degrees of recognition of what emotions are happening within us and what they're trying to get us to do, is situational awareness. So self-awareness 1, and then situational awareness number 2. And situational awareness is the ability to respond to a situation in an effective way. And now think about this, folks, and this is why it's a critical attribute in mental toughness, and that is your ability to respond to any given situation in your life is only going to be as effective as the clarity with which you see the situation. And again, think about that for a second. Clarity of vision drives quality of action. And I think we've all had those times in our life when we've been driven by some strong impulse and emotional impulse, and we didn't respond or act effectively in the midst of the situation that we were in. Because as emotion goes up, clarity tends to go down. And it's critically important then, if we're going to be mentally tough, that we have to be careful that we don't allow our emotions to distract us or to distort us from seeing the situations that we're in. So the key to situational awareness is see with clarity and courage. I've always said this. I don't think reality is not that hard to see. I think reality sometimes is hard to accept. Is that fair, Dave?
Absolutely, very fair.
So it's there, but we don't always see it clearly because we don't always want to see it clearly. And I think it's axiomatic for us that we recognize how we feel is not always a good reference point for what we should do. So we learned in self-awareness that emotion is an impulse to act, and that our emotions want us to do something. Anger, move against; affection, move toward; fear, move away; sadness, sit and soak and be sad and do nothing. Well, should we always do what our emotions want us to do or not do? And the answer, of course, is it all depends on the situation, which is why situation awareness is so important when it comes to mental toughness or to mental discipline. The most effective tool for situational awareness is the equation E plus R equals O. That means event plus response equals outcome. When you're confronted with a situation and you're experiencing a strong emotion, press pause and use E plus R equals O to gain clarity. And here's how you do that. You ask yourself 4 questions. What outcome do I want? What event do I have? What response do I need? What does this situation require of me? Now, I want to put those first 2 attributes of mental toughness together: self-awareness and situational awareness. So be self-aware and recognize what emotions are happening within you and what your emotions are saying to you, what message they're sending, what signal they're sending, what your emotional impulses want you to do or not to do. So be aware of them. Don't do anything with them but be aware of them. And then be situationally aware. And use ERO to gain situational clarity, the O that you want, the E or situation you're in, and what are your options for how to respond? What does the situation require of you? Sometimes the emotion you have will be appropriate, and you use it to energize the response that you need. Other times, the emotional impulse that you have will not be effective. It won't be the emotion that you need, and you'll need to shift and change, which we'll talk about in a minute. But you need to put those 2 things together, self-awareness and situation awareness. You have to step away from the situation and observe it. You have to step away from your own emotion and observe what's going on inside of you. Be self-aware, be situationally aware, elevate your clarity, and then evaluate what does that situation require you to do. So Dave, as I described that, and as we think about all the situations we experience in life, you experience yours, I experience mine, and we observe people. I see a lot of people reacting on impulse or pretty much doing whatever their emotions tell me to do. I don't see a lot of people pressing pause and using some kind of discipline system for clarity of what the situation is and discipline about what their emotional state is. I see a lot of reactionary people out there. What do you see?
Agreed. Same.
Driving cars?
All the time.
Twitter?
Even worse.
All the stuff on social media, it just seems so reactionary. Or just even a conversation you have with somebody, and you take like I mentioned, when you're in a situation and you feel experiencing a strong emotion, politics brings that up, or there are all kinds of things that would trigger that. Wow, people need to. Do these first two attributes make sense?
Oh, 100%.
Well, what gets your attention when you hear about be self-aware, then be situationally aware? What gets your attention about those 2 things?
Well, you and I were talking earlier before the podcast about this topic, and obviously we tend to place a premium on self-awareness because that is ourselves inside our 20 square feet is the one thing that we can control. But we don't get to control the situation around us. We don't get to control those events. So here's a question. Let's say you are self-aware, but you don't have complete clarity on the situation. That is a constraint of the E. or you're running short on time. That is another constraint of the E. How do people operate with that? They have high self-awareness, but they're low on the situational awareness, even despite putting effort to try and gain that clarity.
Yeah, that's a great question. And the attribute, the skill, the discipline is almost common sense. And it's that no one sees all events with 100% clarity. No one. It's impossible. And what you do is you take the time that's available, get as much information as you can, whether it's 5 seconds or 5 minutes or 5 hours, whatever time you have, you get as much clarity and information that's available to you in the time that's allowed, make the best possible decision based on that information, and then respond, and then choose, and then monitor the results and adjust as you move forward. Here's what's interesting. Self-awareness, if you're paying attention, if you're self-aware and situationally aware, gains clarity the further that you move down the line of action. The notion that we're going to gain 100% clarity before we act is never going to happen. It's a myth, and it will cause stress. And which, again, as emotion goes up, as stress goes up, clarity will go down. The discipline then is to use a simple system like E plus R equals O, clarify the E to the best of your ability in the time that you have, the O that you want, and then the R that you think best responds to the E and the O, and then go, launch, act. And then the key is pay attention to what happens and then make the appropriate adjustments. And what you'll find out is, oh, some of what I saw was right on target, and then you'll see some things you didn't see, because you couldn't, one, you didn't have time, or number two, enough hadn't happened yet. So I'm a big believer in make your decision, take your action, and then pay attention to the results you're getting and adjust along the way. Make sense?
Absolutely.
Cool. All right, so number 3, discipline, and this is where we really get to it. The number 3 attribute, I should say, is discipline at defining moments. Self-awareness is 1, situational awareness is 2, discipline at defining moments is number 3. And the great test, the great defining moment in mental toughness is the choice you make when how you feel does not align with what you need to do. And when it comes down to it, folks, when you're in the midst of situations, you can either focus on how you feel or you can focus on what you need to do. And the reality is you're going to, in order to achieve any goal, in order to produce any significant outcome in your life, you're going to have to do things that are uncomfortable and that are difficult. Mental toughness is doing what needs to be done even though you don't feel like it. It's embracing productive discomfort and then doing the work. And then now let's put these 3 together. Let's stack these 3. Self-aware, know what's going on inside you, know how you feel, know what signals those feelings are sending to you and what those feelings want you to do. Don't act on them yet, just be aware of them. Number 2, be situationally aware. Press pause, clarify the O you want, the E you have, and the R that you need. The number 3, be disciplined at defining moments. If your feeling does not align with what you need to do, have the discipline to take action anyway. Embrace productive discomfort. That is the ultimate test of mental toughness, is the choice you make when how you feel doesn't align with what you need to do. And I'm going to push then to number 4 attribute, which is create the energy required, create the mental energy required for the action that you need. And although I don't always feel like doing what needs to be done, I have to have a technique, I have to have a mental discipline to create the mindset or the attitude or the mental energy that will empower and energize me to do what it is that the situation calls for. And folks, different situations call for different mindsets, different kinds of mental energy. Not every situation asks for the same kind of emotional energy state. And I've actually just written down here 6 different situations, and I'm going to give you 6 different mindsets that are required for each of those situations. Daily execution. So every day there's stuff we all need to do to execute our job. Well, the mindset required, the kind of mental state we need to be in, is commitment, diligence, and attention to detail. That's the mindset or the emotional energy that you need to execute something. A second kind of a situation we're in all the time is listening to another person. Well, that requires a whole different mindset. If you're going to listen effectively, you have to have an attitude and mindset of respect, of empathy for the other person, and curiosity about their story and about their situation. Overcoming adversity. There's times when we experience difficult things. Well, the mindset that we need for overcoming adversity is resilience, perseverance, and optimism. You better be resilient. You better have an attitude of perseverance, and you better be optimistic about the future if you're going to successfully navigate through adversity and difficulty. Here's another situation that we're all in a lot: stuck in traffic. And if you drive any place, you find yourself somewhat frequently stuck in traffic. Well, the mindset you need to be effective in that situation is patience, perspective, and a focus on safety. And that's how you successfully navigate through difficult traffic situations. Navigating change is a fifth situation. Today's world, change is omnipresent. It's happening all the time. It's happening faster. It's more complex. And a lot of people resist change. Why? Because they don't have the right mindset. They're not mentally tough in response to change. So if you're going to respond to change, the mindset you need is vision. See the present and the future. See the opportunity in the midst of that change. Confidence. The belief that you will and can do the work necessary to build the new skill and make the adjustments in order to navigate through the change, and embrace productive discomfort. You see the change for what it is. You acknowledge it's uncomfortable. You accept that fact, and you embrace that discomfort, and you make the changes anyway. And then I'll add a sixth one that we work with a lot because we work with athletes, and that is a difficult workout. Although that's not only an athletic thing, that's people going to the gym. The average person trying to get in shape oftentimes faces a difficult workout. Well, the mindset you bring to the gym, the mindset you bring to the pool, to the mat, to the court, to the field, to that determines what kind of a workout you're going to have. Well, the mindset you need is a laser focus on the work you need to do, confidence that you can do the work and get better, and then relentless effort. And all of your mental energy is going into those workouts and those things that you need to do to get in shape or develop that particular physical skill. So we need to create our own energy. You can allow the situation to determine your emotional energy state, or you can intentionally choose your emotional energy and create it yourself. That's going to be the most effective way. So Dave, you hear this. You hear discipline at defining moments. You hear create the mental energy required for the action that you need. What gets your attention?
One of the things that I've recognized in myself ever since learning the system and beginning to implement it is being aware of those impulse emotions in the face of inconvenient and unpleasant events. Because those events are going to happen. And they don't care about me, they don't care about you, they don't care about feelings. The event is going to be what it is. And you're still going to feel that impulse, but using that undisciplined impulse as a trigger to engage a disciplined mindset and disciplined action.
Yeah, so in fact, that's part of what I was thinking as I'm preparing these notes and I'm sharing this, is that this goes back to self-awareness, use the emotion that you're feeling as a signal to deepen your attention, to sharpen your focus, to bring more discipline to the situation. Because I'm going to talk about this in a minute, you're going to have emotional impulse that's non-productive. You can't stop the fact that unproductive emotional impulses will happen.
Right.
And you're saying that, and I agree with you if this is your point, use those emotional bursts, those emotional impulses as a signal to bring greater discipline to your mindset. Is that your point?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I do exactly that. The best of my ability, when I find myself feeling something negative, that's a signal to press pause and bring clarity and focus and these kinds of attributes and disciplines and that's why it all starts with self-awareness. And then what situations trigger those emotions, and then what are you going to do about those emotions as they come up? That's cool. One other thing about creating the energy required for the action that you need and creating the mindset that aligns with the situation that you're in. And I read those 6: daily execution, listening, overcoming adversity, stuck in traffic, navigating change, a difficult workout. Those are just the 6 I just chose right now. You could choose others. Here's what happens in the real world. You may have all those 6 things in one day. It's not like I can choose a mindset for the day and then I just need that one mindset. I better be really flexible and shifting and untethering from one mindset into another one. Like, for example, I'm driving to work and traffic is bad. I better have that mindset for navigating through difficult traffic. I don't want to allow the traffic to dictate or create in me a negative mindset. And then I get to work and there's a bunch of stuff I have to do, and I start digging in, and it's a daily execution, and I got the mindset for execution. I better untether from my driving mindset, and I better then refocus my energy into doing the daily work. Well, in the midst of that, phone's going to ring, knock on the door, someone's going to come in my office, they want to talk to me, and it's an important conversation. And I need to untether from the traffic and untether from daily execution and focus on that person and give them my full attention. Be curious, be empathetic, listen to their story. And at the same time, what they say may be a problem that the company is facing, and it's an adversity that's striking, and all of a sudden I'm faced with adversity. So I'm just making up this scenario, but it as I study this and as I practice this, it's not like one or two mindsets a day. This portfolio of emotional energy had better be ready. So I'd better be very flexible and untether from one mindset and then move into another one and do it quickly and effectively. That's a skill. That's a mental toughness attribute, and it's not natural. It's a learned skill, and the sooner you learn it, you know what else I think it is? And it's called Mental Health 101. It's the ability really to be somewhat calm and somewhat clear and somewhat confident about all the stuff that happens in life, as opposed to getting frustrated and frazzled because I can't untether from a negative mindset. Well, that leads me to the fifth and final attribute, which is knowing how to get out of a negative emotional state and into a positive one. And I've shared this with a lot of workshop folks, and the way I phrase it sometimes is the ability to have a good attitude when you're in a bad mood. And whenever I say that, there's a visceral response in the workshop or in the keynote session, because everyone experiences bad moods. Everyone experiences negative emotional impulses. All of us have feelings that aren't always that productive. So the great question is, in mental toughness, what do you do when your mood goes bad? What do you do when you find yourself drifting into a negative emotional energy state? Two things then it requires of us. Manage your focus, that is what you give your attention to, and manage your self-talk and your stories. And that is how you obviously talk to yourself. And you're always giving your attention to something, and you're always talking to yourself and telling yourself a story. And that first one is whatever you give your attention to, whatever you focus on, you're going to describe it to yourself with some kind of a story or self-talk. You talk to yourself more than you talk to any other person. The question is, what are you saying to yourself, and what kind of emotion is your self-talk, is your story creating? So getting into a productive emotional state requires that you focus on what matters and filter out what doesn't. Now, that sounds easy, but it's hard to do. And a lot of things get our attention that don't really matter. And a lot of times, negative things get our attention. That's something that cognitive scientists have studied. It's called negativity bias. Our mind is attracted more, and we give more attention to negative things than we do to positive things. It finds its way into things like loss aversion. People would rather avoid a loss and do the effort to avoid a loss than they would do the effort to achieve an outcome. But the fact is, if you're going to get out of a negative state into a positive one, if you're going to create in yourself productive emotional state, you have to find and focus on what matters and filter out what doesn't. And recognize that just because something gets your attention, it doesn't mean it deserves your attention. You have to be very disciplined about what you focus on and what you give your attention to. And here's the key. Go back to situation awareness and E plus R equals O. And this is what I found to be a very helpful, simple, not easy to do, but simple, practical thing. Find and focus on what you need to do, not on how you feel. And I've noticed this when we do mindset training and mental toughness training is if you find yourself focusing on three things, and here are the three things you don't want to focus on. If you do focus on these three things, you're going to get into a negative mindset. And that would be self, things that you can't control, and negative things that you don't like. If you focus on those three things, you're going to be in trouble. Let me give them to you again. Self, things you can't control, and things that you don't like, things that irritate you. If you focus on the negative and you focus on things you can't control and you're self-centered, you're going to talk negative, you're going to feel negative, you're not going to be productive in your action. I've seen this over and over and over in virtually every domain. So we need to focus on what matters, filter out what doesn't, particularly focus on what you need to do, not on how you feel. And then number two, talk to yourself in a positive, productive way. And it's like I said a moment ago, if you focus on what needs to be done, then you talk to yourself in a positive way, then you're going to feel positive and your action is going to be productive. It's just how the human mind works. But the opposite is also true. If you fixate on the negative and you talk to yourself in negative ways, you're going to generate negative emotional energy and your action will not be productive. And it is so important to remember this. You are the author of the focus and the stories that create your emotional state. You are the author of the self-talk and the stories and of the focus and the attention that creates your emotional energy. So when you feel yourself drifting into a negative emotional state, press pause and interrupt the negative process. This is so important. When you feel yourself drifting into a negative emotional state, press pause and interrupt the negative pattern. Redirect your focus, reframe how you see the situation, and replace negative self-talk with positive self-talk. Replace a negative story with a positive story. Folks, don't get stuck in a negative story. Now, this is hard to do because negative emotions do not easily give up the negative stories that feed them. I'm going to say that again. This is hard to do because negative emotions do not easily give up the negative stories that feed them. But the only way that a negative emotion can continue to exist in your mind and in your life is if you continue to feed it a negative story. So starve those negative emotions to death. Stop feeding them with negative stories. If you change the story, you change the emotion. You are the author of the focus and the stories that create your negative emotional state. So Dave, as we're closing up this last one is amazing. Your thoughts, what gets your attention about that last attribute?
We've talked about in the E+R=O system, the importance of being able to predict events. Like we know a bunch of events that are going to be happening to us in the near future.
Or anticipate, right?
Anticipate,
Yep.
There we go. That's
Yep.
a better word.
Yep.
So how important is it for people to have a prepared self-talk for those anticipated or predictable events? Or think of it more in terms of anchor self-talk, that they can, whenever that event happens, they have some that's already pre-planned that they can rely on that's going to help them get into a positive emotional state.
Yeah, that's a critically important, not just question, but a discipline. That's an attribute of a mentally tough person. A mentally tough person, it's a form, frankly, of situational awareness, where you look at your world and you say, I know this is going to happen when I drive. I know this is going to happen at work. I know this is going to happen at home. And I know from experience that those things tend to trigger in me negative emotional energy. Therefore, if I know that focus and self-talk, managing my focus and managing my self-talk are the two keys to producing positive emotional state, man, I better know how to redirect my focus and what self-talk, what story I need when that situation happens. And I'm prepared, not surprised, prepared. I anticipate those events and situations that I know tend to trigger in me a counterproductive or negative emotional state. And that's just mental toughness. That is saying, that's discipline. That's saying, when I go to the office, I'm going to see so-and-so. They tend to irritate me. Therefore, I'm going to have in my mind some kind of self-talk or story that produces in me a positive emotional state towards that person. For example, again, I'm making this up. Let's say the person's name is Fred. And so Fred tends to irritate me. And I go to the office, Fred's walking down the hall. Ahead of time, I've prepared myself. Fred's important to our team. This is me talking to me. This is a self-talk, a story, a script that I've prepared ahead of time that I use. Hey, Fred's important to our team. Sometimes it's a struggle for me to listen to Fred, but it's really important that I tune into him. He's got important things to say. He's had a lot of insights for us. He's solved a lot of problems. He produces for us. I'm going to lean into what he has to say. I'm going to connect with him today. That's me talking to me. Now, that stuff has to be true, by the way. If those things aren't true about Fred, then that's a different scenario. But most of the time in that kind of scenario that I just painted, there are a lot of true things about the person or the situation that the negative emotion doesn't want you talking about. This is my point about negative emotions do not want to give up on the stories that feed them. Negative emotions are not interested in alternative stories. And understand this, negative emotions don't seek truth. They don't seek reality. Negative emotions simply want the story that feeds them and keeps them alive, which is why we have to step back and use all these attributes to discipline ourselves and be tough mentally to be able to navigate through all these kind of circumstances. Same thing when I drive my car. Someone tailgates me. Script is, be safe, move over, let him go. That's a prepared script. If I haven't prepared that ahead of time and someone tailgates me and I haven't thought about it and I haven't anticipated, there's a pretty good chance I'm not going to be all that disciplined and I may not respond as safely as I could and calmly as I could. But if I know that and I practice that script, because you're going to get tailgated, you're going to get cut off, the things are going to happen. Same thing when I travel. When the flight's canceled, I've got a prepared script. Find the next flight, call Brenda, check email, go to work. I'm ready to go, so I don't get disrupted by it. So, folks, this is a massively important topic, mental toughness. And grasping and understanding what it is and how it works is worthy of you listening to this episode multiple times and working to put these attributes, make it part of your DNA. So in closing, let me summarize these 5 attributes of mental toughness. Number 1 is self-awareness, knowing what emotions are happening within you, recognizing them and understanding what they want you to do or not do. Number 2 is situational awareness. That is pressing pause and using E plus R equals O to be aware of the O you want, the E you have, and the R that you need, and asking, what does this situation require of me? The number 3 is discipline at defining moments. Those situations that come up where how you feel does not align with what you need to do. And then you embrace productive discomfort, be mentally tough, and you do what you need to do, whether or not you feel like it. And the number 4, create the energy required for the action that you need. Be effective at creating your own energy in order to do the things that your life, personally and professionally, requires of you. Then number 5, know how to get yourself out of a negative emotional state and into a positive, productive one. Have the discipline to manage what you focus on, give your attention to, and how you talk to yourself and the stories that you tell yourself. Mastering these attributes will improve every aspect of your life. Go do the work. Hey, folks, a quick word about podcast number 50, the next one after this one. We've been trying to get someone on our podcast for a while. A very close friend of mine I've worked with for a lot of years, and that's Coach Urban Meyer. And last week, I had the opportunity to sit down with him for about an hour, and we had a great conversation about leadership, about culture, about disciplined behavior, about competitive excellence. And it's a podcast you definitely don't want to miss. So next time, an hour with Urban Meyer.
So, hey, TK, what is some of that pre-planned self-talk that you have found valuable in the past that you've used? You said the airport example, but what are some other areas of your life that you've used it? Maybe it's whenever you were coming back from your knee surgery and you were going through your rehab, or whenever you've got a bunch of work that gets piled up on you. Like, how do you use it?
Well, that's interesting. So I can think of a couple of just personal examples. I mean, one, actually, I think I shared this way back when we did R2 in the podcast from R Factor. One is when I'm listening to people, I've got self-talk that I use. I'm not a natural listener. I've developed a skill over the years, and I'm really good at it now most of the time. But I wasn't always, and the self-talk I use now, the focus and self-talk I use now is when someone's talking to me, inside my head I say, wow, I wonder what this situation looks like and feels like from that person's perspective. Hey, I wonder what's important to this person. I'm going to find out. I'm going to ask about that. I mean, I'm literally inside of myself, talking to myself, saying, be curious. Have an attitude of discovery. Find out what's important to this person. Ask them about that, Tim. Again, this is not me out loud. This is me literally talking to myself. And what that does, Dave, is that puts my attention on my self-talk, create curiosity and a degree of empathy. And if I find something that they're saying that I can latch on to, I will then add my own internal narrative to that. So if it's something happy, I will say, well, that sounded happy, find out more about it. Or that sounded scary, find out more about it. Or that sounded sad, ask them about that. And that creates in me literally an emotional state that puts me into a listening mode. Mm-hmm. Is that kind of stuff you're talking about?
Yeah, very much so.
So in the knee surgery, it's interesting. I had lots of positive energy around my knee replacement. The first was before I ever had it, or getting up to it, where when I'm at the hospital prepping, my thoughts were, my mind was, my self-talk was, man, I can't wait to get this done and start doing the work. I can't wait to wake up from surgery, shake off the anesthesia, and get to work doing the rehab. And I also, and little confession here, I also said to myself, I'm going to come back faster than most people come back because I'm going to do more work than most people do. And I said, I'm going to compete. Not in a negative way, but it was definitely there. It was part of my mindset. I did not one time have a single feeling of fear or worry or anything, literally zero negative feelings of any kind before, during, or after my knee replacement. It was all, can't wait to get the surgery done, can't wait to wake up, can't wait to shake off the drugs, can't wait to go to work, can't wait to be better than others have done this in the past and accelerate the rehab. And I saw myself, walking without any aid. I saw myself having greater flexion and extension of other people. It's just how I thought about it. And another thing that I've always said when I work out that I did even more discipline during the rehab was this statement that I make, best grandpa ever, which is my personal narrative that motivates me and creates the energy to train because, my grandkids are 4, 2.5, and Thurwin to be born in October, and I'm 66, and I can do the math. And so when Georgia is 15 or 14, I'm going to be 76. And, when Luke is 15 or when Luke's in high school, I'm going to be 80 or in college. So I intend on being around, and I intend on being active and energetic, and I don't want to miss a beat of any of that. So I'm not training in the gym now to win a race. I'm not training in the gym to defeat someone on the football field. I'm training in the gym to be best grandpa ever. And it's really interesting. I've said it so often, and there is almost an immediate positive physiological response when I say that to myself. I mean, you can almost feel it's like a switch is thrown. Not always, but most of the time. And it's pretty cool. So those are a couple of areas where I've taken this focus and self-talk discipline and have applied it to my life. And I cannot imagine living without it, to be honest with you.
Let me go into this just for a little bit because you bring up exercise and training. And just me personally, I think it is such a valuable tool for people to use, not just to keep the body and the mind healthy, but as a tool to access that inner voice. Because there are certain stresses that you can put on the body during exercise that's going to create or allow some of those negative self-talks to appear. That quitting voice is going to show up whenever you're 45 minutes into it and you're drenched soaking and you got to go because you got work or kids or something like that later. But the right thing to do is just to stay with it.
Hold on. If I could get the vast majority of our audience 45 minutes into any workout, we'd be doing great. So I'm not concerned if you're 45 minutes in and you're drenched, quit and go home, you're fine. I'm just thinking of I know what you're talking about, but for a lot of people, the practical application of this to their physical fitness life is just go get in the gym and start doing some stuff.
That's fair.
So, to be 45 minutes in and drenched and you're listening to the quitting voice, man, I wish that's where everybody was. But a lot of people in our country today, they just need to go stop eating as much and start exercising more. That's the starting point. And negative self-talk's holding them back. Low energy's holding them back. And what we need to do is they need to flip the script. They need to change the story. Like we said, you are the author of the focus and the self-talk that creates your emotional state. And if you find yourself coming up with an excuse. Now, here, let me give you another practical example. So physical fitness is great. And I think at my age, I'm pretty good at that. There's a couple other areas in my life, though, where I need more discipline. So I tend to be a pretty disorganized person. And you go down to my office and you look in the office and like, how does he find stuff in there? And it's been kind of messy.
I've been in your office.
Yeah, I know. And so there's a place where I haven't been as effective at applying this same discipline as I have been in other areas. That's just the reality of it. No, again, I'm subject to the physics. I'm not exempt from this stuff like anybody else. And it's not as if everyone at Focus 3, myself included, like we have this wired and we live these super disciplined lives. No, there's gaps, and there's a gap. Another big gap is I haven't written the R Factor book yet. And a lot of people are waiting, and it's been, how long? It's been a long time. And I'm busy and a lot of stuff going on. But part of it is focus and self-talk. Part of it is creating myself the energy that I need to step a bit later, get up a bit earlier, do a little less of this and more of the writing, and get in that cadence and get that rhythm. And so I think that's important for everyone to understand. And you're asking the personal application. So those are some areas that pop up. I'm really good driving. I'm really good at in listening to my wife. I'm really good at physical fitness for the most part. I'm really good when I'm flying and I'm navigating through the difficulties and challenges and adversity of airline travel. I'm not so good at organizing stuff. And so far, haven't been disciplined at writing the book. And that goes back to these very same disciplines we're talking about. And that is, what do we focus on? How do you talk to yourself? What kind of energy does that create? How do you get yourself out of a negative emotional energy state into a more productive one? And what kind of discipline do you bring at defining moments? So I think it's important for everyone just to hear the reality of it. And we could tell all the good stories, and I love them. And it's great to say, I'm really good here, here, and here. But that's not the whole story. That's not the whole truth. And I think it's only fair to talk about the dark side as well as the good.